Let's take a look at graphing some functions. The first thing that we'll look at is A on our next page, which is y equals the absolute value of x plus 3. What we should notice is we've got an absolute value, which is those little bars around our x, which means it's going to tell us what shape we're looking at, is that we're looking at the V shape. The plus 3, on the other hand, the question is, what's that going to do? Well, first of all, we have to determine whether or not it's inside the function or outside of the function. Well, because it's not inside of the absolute values, it's on the outside. Remember, things that are coming out of our function affect y values, meaning they're going to affect whether or not we're going up or down. And we've talked about this, is when you're going up, it's because you've got a plus or a positive, and when you're going down, it's because you've got a minus. So what this means when we put the V shape together with the fact that the plus 3 out here should be moving us up 3 is, well, we would start with our original V shape, which normally goes through 0, 0, 1, 1, and it normally also goes through negative 1, 1. We would take all 3 of these points and shift them up 3. So what's going to happen is the 0, 0 point is going to go up to just 3. The 1, 1 is going to go up to 1, 4. And the negative 1, 1 is going to go up to negative 1, 4. And then once we've made those moves, then we can just draw our V shape through those 3 new points. And then notice that green graph, that V, is our final graph. Now let's look at finding the domain of this graph. Is if we look at our graph, reading it from left to right, which is how you find domain, you want to start on the negative end, the smallest end. So that would mean you're starting on the end where you've got negative infinity and working towards your end where you've got positive infinity. What you would notice is that your graph continues on forever in both directions, both left and right, which actually means that your domain is going to be negative infinity to positive infinity. The question is, what about your range? Well, if we take a look at range, let's see. We'd work the same way. We'd start down at negative infinity and work our way up to positive infinity. So working our way from the bottom down to the top is what you notice is that your graph actually doesn't start until you hit up here at 3. But then after 3, it does continue forever towards infinity. So that means our graph would start here at 3 and would continue towards infinity for our range. Now, just like before, we know that infinity always has a parentheses. The question is, what's going to go on at the 3? Well, notice we do have a graph at 3. So that means we're going to have a point there, which means we do need to use a bracket and include the value 3 because there is a graph there. But that would be our final answer for our range, would be bracket 3 to positive infinity, because it does continue in the upward direction forever. Let's take a look at B. In B, we have y equals the absolute value of x minus 3. Because we've got the absolute value here again, it means we're going to have a V shape. Because we do have a minus 3 again, and the minus 3 is on the outside, that means it's going to shift us either up or down. Because, though, of the negative, it means we're actually going to shift our graph down 3. So we'd start with our original V shape, which goes through 0, 0, 1, 1, negative 1, 1, and looks kind of like this. Doesn't have to be perfect. This is just my sketch of the original V-shaped absolute value graph. Now what we're going to do is, because of the minus 3, we're going to shift the whole thing down 3, which means that the point that was at 0, 0 is going to be down at negative 3 now. The point that was at 1, 1 is going to be down 3 at 1, negative 2. And the point that was at negative 1, 1 is now going to go down 3 and is now going to be at negative 1, negative 2. And then we can draw our V shape. And that will again be our final graph. Continuing along, the next thing that we'd want to do is work on our domain. And our range. So let's talk about our domain first. Our domain is reading along the x-axis, starting at the smallest values, the negative infinity, and working towards the largest, towards the right, the positive infinity. And what you'll notice, working from left to right, is our graph continues along in both directions forever, on the left side and the right side. So that means our domain is going to be negative infinity to positive infinity. Just like always, infinities always need parentheses around them. So that's going to be our domain, negative infinity to positive infinity, where both have parentheses. The next one in range, we're going to start at negative infinity, the small end, and work our way up towards positive infinity, the large end. Well, starting at negative infinity and working our way up, we notice our graph doesn't even start until its bottom here at -3. Then it does continue in the upward direction towards positive infinity forever. So that means our range is going to be -3 to infinity. Just like before, infinity will get a parentheses like always. However, because there is an actual point and graph here at -3, we do want to include -3 in our range. So we're also going to need to use a bracket at -3. But that's it. Let's take a look at another one. Again, we have the absolute value bars, which means we're still going to have a V shape. The difference with this next one in C, though, is that we have a +3, but this time it's actually inside of the absolute value bars. Because it's inside of the absolute value bars, it's going to be moving us either left or right. Remember, a positive actually moves you left. A negative will move you right. It's opposite of what you would think. So this +3 actually means I'm going to move to the left 3. So I can still do what I did in the last ones, which is draw my original V-shaped graph, our original absolute value graph, which looks something like this. But then the entire graph is going to have to move 3 places to the left. So 0, 0 will end up being at -3, 0. 1, -1, 1 will be at now -4, 1. And 1, 1 will be at -2, 1. And then that will be the same V shape, but that will be our final graph because it was shifted to the left 3. I'd still want to go after my domain and then my range, one thing at a time. Starting with my domain, let's see. We'd be reading our graph from left to right, starting at the small end, the negative infinity, working towards positive infinity. And what we would notice is our graph continues both left and right forever. So our domain is going to be negative infinity to positive infinity again. However, the range is a little bit different because we didn't shift our graph up or down. We're going to start at negative infinity and work our way up towards positive infinity. And what we'll notice is that our graph doesn't even start until the middle here at 0. And then it will continue on forever towards infinity. So that means our range is from 0 to infinity. Just like before, there is an actual point at 0. So we are going to need to include it, and it means we're going to use a bracket at 0. But that's our final answer for our graph is in red, and for the domain and range is written. Continuing along in the next one, in D, we have a squared graph. Remember, a squared graph is that parabola shape, that U shape. Normally, that x squared graph, the parabola shape, goes through 0, 0, 1, 1, -1, 1, just like the V shape, except for it's a U shape or parabola shape. However, this time we have a -3 to deal with. Notice the minus 3 is on the inside of the squared term. Because it's on the inside, it's going to be affecting x values, meaning we're going to move either left or right. Now, because it's a minus 3, we're actually going to do the reverse of what you'd think. We'd actually shift it right 3. So the point that was at 0, 0, moving that to the right 3 is going to be at positive 3, 0. The 1, 1 will be at 4, 1. And the negative 1, 1 will be at 2, 1. But it'll be the same U shape. And that will be our final graph, is the red graph here. Now, let's take a look at finding the domain and the range, working our way from left to right. Let's see, the domain is going to start out with our negative infinity on the left, working our way bigger to the positive infinity. Notice if we work our way from left to right, the graph does continue in both directions forever. So our domain is going to be negative infinity to positive infinity. However, our range is a little bit different. Our range will start out at the bottom at negative infinity and work our way up to positive infinity. But what we'll notice, working our way up, is that our graph doesn't even start until the middle here at 0. Then it does continue on forever past that towards positive infinity, which means that our domain is going to be, our range is going to be from 0 to infinity. Again, infinities always have parentheses. And notice we do have a big point at 0, so we do need to include the fact that there is a graph in our range at 0. So we'll put a bracket there.